All right. Changes to the CGT rules for non-residents. So firstly, these rules has already been legislation. So this is law already. So as a recap, from 1 January 2025, the foreign CGT withholding. So this relates to TAP assets, right? There's disposals by non-residents which are subjected to Australian CGT. The withholding rate increases from 12.5 to 15%. The threshold reduced to 0. Okay. Now, an important track here is companies or yourselves and individuals dispose of a TAP asset and thinking that because I'm a resident, this does not apply to me, right? No, the rules assume that you are a non-resident unless you get a clearance certificate from the ATO. You want to get a clearance certificate because you as a seller, you want the full process on settlement. And if you are a buyer, you want a copy of that clearance certificate. Why? It's because you are liable for the withholding, whether or not you have fully remitted the funds to the seller. So make sure this is included in your property acquisition and disposals checklist. Now, this announcement was in the budget before, 2024-2025 budget announcements. The start date has been deferred to, as announced in the last week's budget, has been deferred from 1 July 2025 to, broadly speaking, the quarter after the law receives royal assent. So what the consultation paper released by Treasury says is they intend to clarify and broaden the Australian CGT tax net to include the following assets. So rather than depending on the various state interpretation of what is connected to land, they say that, well, from now on, TAP assets includes leases or licenses to use land, this was already got anyway, water entitlements, and this is the important bit, infrastructure and machinery installed on land. And these are examples from the EM of assets which are got: wind turbines, solar panels, batteries, rail networks, ports and airports, and heavy machinery installed on land for use in mining operations. These assets are now caught under the Australian CGT net. Options to acquire any of the above and a non-portfolio interest in an entity. So this is called the principal asset test. Non-portfolio interest is a 10% or more equity interest in the entity, where 50% of underlying market value of the entity is derived from the above asset. Okay. And people are entering into smart transactions to arrangements. So to avoid this, so it also captures economic interest in TAP, where you receive payments for rights to future income from TAP or from total return swaps. Those arrangements will be caught as well. The two further changes. One is your principal asset test. In working out, whether you fail the 50% threshold that we spoke about earlier, currently it's a point-in-time test at the date of the CGT event. So you look at a CGT event, you do your market valuation on that day to work out whether you fail the 50% test. That means you can undertake restructures here that will affect the 50% test. Now, it's proposed that this be changed to a 365-day test. So you need to look at 365 days before the date of disposal. If on any day you fail the principal asset test, you will fail that test. There's also a new notification requirements for disposals by foreign residents where they dispose shares or other membership interests with a value of $20 million. or more. And this is required if the vendor makes a what's called a non-indirect Australian real property interest. So the non-residents gives you a declaration. These are not TAP assets. These shares are not TAP assets. You as a buyer then do not need to withhold unless you know that the declaration is wrong. And there's no way exactly you know exactly whether the declaration is wrong. So when they make a declaration, there is now a need to notify the ATO at least 28 days before the CGT events. These 28 days is subject to change following consultation. If the ATO disagree with the declaration, it may recommend for the declaration to be withdrawn. Otherwise, the buyer can rely on that declaration. So I recommend that you update your acquisitions and disposals checklist.